The boy accidentally fell into a barn and kept sinking into the corn pile. When the firefighters arrived, they planned to set up a ladder to reach the barn. One firefighter warned the others not to step on the corn, as it would sink like quicksand. They tried to calm the boy down while only stepping on the boards, as stepping on the corn would cause it to collapse under their weight. They put a horse collar around the boy's neck to pull him out, but the pressure from the corn was overwhelming, so the firefighters sealed the boy inside some boards and used machinery to vacuum out the corn around him. Suddenly, one firefighter's safety rope snapped, and she quickly fell into the corn pile, sinking further. They tried to grab her hand, but soon both firefighters were trapped in the corn. The captain quickly activated the backup plan. They used a cutting machine to cut through the barn's outer wall. The firefighters instructed the boy to sink further into the corn to make room. Once the hole was cut, the boy in the corn erupted out of the opening, and he wasn't hurt. The two firefighters who had fallen in were also pulled out safely, and the rescue operation was successfully completed. A strange body arrived at the morgue. The coroner was about to perform an autopsy, but the man wasn't actually dead. He could clearly feel everything around him, but he just couldn't wake up. After taking pictures of the man, the coroner drew the incision lines. As he took out the scalpel, the man suddenly woke up. The poor coroner fainted in shock, and the scalpel fell onto his leg. The man quickly grabbed his phone and skillfully dialed 911. When the paramedics arrived at the morgue, the man had already bandaged the coroner's wound. The paramedics were shocked because they had seen him that morning and thought he was dead. This crazy guy was overjoyed and explained that he had narcolepsy. Whenever he fell asleep, all his vital signs disappeared, so everyone thought he had died. The paramedics checked his pulse, but the man wasn't frightened. This was the third time he had been declared dead. The paramedics suggested he get a tattoo so others would know he wasn't actually dead. This woman suddenly felt an intense itch on her arm. She grabbed a fork and started scratching it aggressively. Her coworker quickly tried to stop her, but she walked straight to the window. She slammed her head against the glass repeatedly and then jumped out. Others called 911 immediately. When firefighters arrived, they found the woman severely injured and confirmed she had died. Her coworkers were confused and scared. They said she had acted as though she was being controlled by something. Suddenly, a man in the office began hallucinating. He clutched a knife tightly and seemed unable to hear anyone. More strange behavior followed. Several others began walking toward the windows. 3 of them jumped, falling from the building. Firefighters rushed to call for backup. Many people in the office were showing signs of heart arrhythmia. A firefighter started investigating the food on their desks. He noticed that the people who hadn't eaten lunch were behaving normally. This led them to suspect the food was contaminated. After careful inspection, they found traces of mercury hidden in the meals. The firefighters ordered the same takeout and traced it back to the delivery man. He was arrested shortly after. During questioning, the man admitted to poisoning the food. He said he did it because the office workers never tipped him. The woman anxiously called the firefighters, saying the street was on fire, but when they arrived, they couldn't find any flames. She led them to her backyard, where a pleasant smell of smoke was drifting through the air. One firefighter commented that it smelled like barbecue. As they looked around, they discovered someone was grilling in the ground. Suddenly, a neighbor stormed over angrily and began arguing with the woman. He told the firefighters that the woman had also called the police during his daughter's birthday, just because they were hitting a piñata. The woman had failed to recognize her mistake and was still insisting on making the call. The firefighters then informed her they would be arresting someone. The woman was shocked, realizing that making false emergency calls was illegal in the US. The neighbor left, satisfied with the outcome. To avoid being arrested, the woman pretended to have a heart attack. As the firefighters prepared to give her CPR, she suddenly woke up, frightened by the situation. In the end, she would rather be taken to jail than face the consequences of her actions. This firefighter was extremely angry because someone had impersonated him on a dating site, chatting with many girls. Using the IP address from the email header, he tracked down the person's address. They arrived at the person's house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. The windows were covered with flies, and inside they discovered a body infested with maggots. The coroner determined that the man had been dead for 10 days, yet no one had noticed. The firefighters suddenly felt sorry for the man, even though he was a scam artist who deceived people emotionally. They didn't know how to move him because his body had swollen to several times its normal size. Outside, a crowd had gathered. The firefighter thought the man deserved dignity, so he decided to deflate the body before placing him in a bag. But this process would take time. The firefighter used scissors to make a small hole and inserted a tube into the body. The air began to slowly escape, and the man's body started shrinking. Suddenly, some disgusting goo sprayed out. By the time everything was cleaned up, it was already evening, and the firefighters moved the body out. The restaurant was hosting an eating contest. Whoever could finish a 2.7 kilogram steak first would win free steaks for life. A large man and a petite woman were the main competitors, both filled with determination as the contest began. The crowd cheered with excitement. To speed up, the woman drank large amounts of water, allowing her to eat faster and finish half of the steak first. Meanwhile, the man was struggling. He patted his mouth, clearly nearing his limit. The woman, still eating voraciously, even walked over to show off in front of him. The audience erupted in applause for her. Suddenly, the man felt nauseous. He could no longer continue and announced his withdrawal from the contest. At the same time, the woman took her final bite, becoming the first winner. However, just as the crowd was celebrating, she suddenly collapsed to the floor. Firefighters arrived and checked her heart rate and blood pressure. Fortunately, she only had a minor head injury. However, one firefighter noticed her bladder was extremely swollen. Having consumed a significant amount of water, she was suffering from water intoxication. The firefighters prepared to catheterize her to relieve the pressure. They inserted the tube into her bladder, and soon a torrent of urine sprayed onto the wall. While a man was focused on driving, something suddenly fell onto his car. To his shock, he realized it was a woman. Panicked, he immediately called 911. A witness who had seen the incident explained that the woman had fallen from the 7th floor balcony. When firefighters arrived, they prepared to lift her off the car. They first stabilized her neck and spine and checked her pulse, which was faint. As they were about to move her, they noticed that both her legs were broken. Acting quickly, they brought splints to secure her injuries. The woman, in pain and despair, muttered that her life was over. She seemed to be looking for something, so the firefighters entered her apartment. There they found her phone and uncovered the reason for her accident. She had been filming herself, aspiring to become the hottest yoga influencer on YouTube. The firefighters chuckled as they pieced together what happened. She had gone to her balcony to practice yoga poses for her video, but had accidentally fallen off shortly after starting. Coincidentally, the man was driving along the road at the exact moment she fell, and she landed on his car. Do you think the car actually cushioned her fall, potentially preventing even more severe injuries? One evening, a family was watching a kung fu movie when they suddenly heard a tornado warning. The father quickly gathered his children and brought them into the bathroom, telling them to take shelter in the bathtub. However, their cat was still in the living room. Determined to save it, the father went out to bring the cat inside, but the frightened animal had hidden under the table. Suddenly, a powerful tornado burst through the windows, tearing the entire house apart. Meanwhile, a taxi driver was dropping off 2 passengers when the tornado warning blared again. As she prepared to leave, she spotted the tornado approaching fast. She turned the car around and tried to outrun it, but within moments, the tornado lifted her car into the air. The firefighters received a distress call from the woman but couldn't pinpoint her exact location. When they arrived, they found the street completely destroyed by the tornado. They spotted a car precariously wedged between 2 buildings, with the woman trapped inside. Using a ladder, the firefighters climbed onto the rooftop to reach her. The captain quickly set up an airbag below for a safe landing. A female firefighter reached the woman and assessed the situation. The car was unstable and could fall at any moment, making it impossible to pull the woman up. Instead, they instructed her to jump onto the airbag first. The woman hesitated but eventually leaped to safety. Moments later, the firefighter followed, landing safely as well.